Video games need obstacles. It wouldn't be much of a game if all you did was just walk straight to the goal. Whether it be something literal like walls, something more abstract like demon, or something more esoteric like your mom telling you to stop playing the computer and do your homework. Obstacles are what make achieving goals so satisfying, and video games make those obstacles particularly memorable. Headcrab, Big Daddy, Necromorph, Cyberdemon, Leshen. All iconic enemies from our favorite games. Enemy design is one of the most important design decisions in the game, so much so that some franchises get defined by a singular enemy, for better or worse. So what does it take to make an enemy design? Well, first off, you need an idea. Ideas don't have to be complex. Bioshock's Big Daddy is just a beefed up old diving suit. Or you can go Silent Hill route, where you need 8 wiki paragraphs to understand what the fuck you're looking at. As for my game, my enemies are going to be mainly of alien origin. But unlike Half-Life aliens who are reptilian? Amphibian? Mine are more so based on insects. And why insects? Well, I want to make my enemies scary, and it just so happens that I have entomophobia. What is entomophobia? It's a fear of insects. I actually went to look up the definition of entomophobia for this video, and they had a picture of a bug attached to it, and I actually jump scared myself with a goddamn Google search. Suffice to say, bugs are no-brainer for scary enemies. And also that sourcing reference images is really difficult. After that, we need to make concept art. Some people might think it's not that important if you are working alone, but let me tell you, it's really hard to 3D model without a reference, especially if you're making non-humans. Even a basic drawing can give you a rough concept of expectations. So here's how our work process looks so far. Decide on a concept, visualize it in your head, and then put it into an image. Nowadays there are many ways to create concept art. You can do a stock photo collage in Photoshop, or put prompts into an AI model. But I'm a classic guy. I pick up a stylus and draw my stuff on canvas. I don't mean to throw shade over other options, just do what works best for you. But for me, there's just something about sketching shapes on digital paper and seeing them come together real time in just the right way that really allows the idea to blossom. Yeah, I'm not that good of a designer. But that's okay, because the important part is that I had fun. And that I found a friend to collaborate with. Meet lovely Miss Sugar. She has already helped me design a previous enemy, one you might have already seen, the Tentaleech. Developing games is difficult, and it's okay to ask for help. A lot of people have a dream of a one-man development team, but just think about how many things a game needs. It needs textures, code, models, sounds, voice acting, music, levels, plot, AI, gameplay, and those are the only big things, not even including things like lighting engineer or foliage designer. Games are a load of work, and we need to take any help we can get. Sugar has a history of drawing various creatures and monsters, which is perfect for the project. The creature we'll be focusing today is codenamed Brute Force. It's a beetle-inspired alien with thick armor and fast movement, but severe lack of any ranged options. It will charge its enemies with its spiked horn and massive body. The shell on its back also offers protection from damage, making it particularly hard to kill unless you can outmaneuver it. As I said, having a reference is important for 3D modeling. That's why we need a turn-around reference. This is a set of pictures from an orthographic view. We make a drawing for each important angle, which is usually just front and sides. But if your character has a particular set of detail, it can be back, top, bottom, and any amount that will help you with 3D modeling. The next step is very important. After you're done with your turn-around drawings, make sure to save the wrong file and accidentally lose all the progress. Then, scour your DMs to find a low-resolution copy you sent to a friend and use that one instead. Now we put both reference images into our 3D modeling software of choice. Mine is going to be Blender. We align the reference to the axis they were drawn for, and we start to create the mesh. Some of you with no 3D modeling experience might be confused how the references are used. It's a bit tricky to explain, but it's kind of like redrawing an image in 3D. We trace the shapes from one drawing to another, but since our shape is 3-dimensional and the drawing is 2-dimensional, we need a second drawing to compensate for the flatness. So, we trace the front image in 3D. Then we use the side image to adjust our shape and add dimension. This way we can make two 2-dimensional drawings into one 3-dimensional model. The modeling process isn't that interesting to behold. The only interesting part we have to keep in mind is the poly limit. I wasn't particularly stingy about how many triangles I made as long as the shape was right, and this game came out to about 650 polygons. For comparison, an Alien Grunt, which is comparable in size, is a bit over 800 polygons. For something more substantial, we have texturing. After we finish our model, we have to assign textures to it, that will later be turned into materials. When it comes to characters' textures, I'd really love to tell you all about the period accurate techniques for making the most out of your textures resolutions, but the truth is, I'm not all that good at texture making. Making models and textures is just a necessary element of making video games, and if I want to make video games, I need to make models and textures. And while I am getting better as I practice more, I am not hiding the fact that I'm mediocre at it at best. That's why my texturing process is very much subpar in comparison to the actual 90s pros. Let me give you a taste of what these guys could do. This is Sheik, a character from Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, on Nintendo 64, released in 1998. Nintendo 64 was quite considerably lacking in storage, so the textures for this console had to be tiny. This is how optimized Sheik's textures are. It looks pretty confusing, doesn't it? Well, let me shed some light on it. Do you see that symbol? It's actually only half of a symbol, mirrored across Sheik's chest to create a full one. See these highlights on their blue costume? This blue dot is stretched all around the model to create an effect of shiny material. All these purple-white elements are just single rectangle that's cropped to create a pattern. Sheik doesn't have any hand texture, only fingers, because their face is the same color as hands anyway, so you can just use the cheek for everything except nails. It's a crazy well-made texture, and I'm not even going to try creating something as good as this. Now you might think, hey, if you're making Half-Life styled models, why don't you make the textures the same way Valve did? Well, let me tell you that Half-Life's textures are made in a really weird way, at least for modern standards. Instead of having one big picture for all the texture parts, each part is its own image that's completely separate from the rest. Was this a good way to make textures on Gold Source? No clue. Is this a good way to make textures nowadays? Absolutely not. Basically, your computer needs to load each texture if you want to display it in the game. But as I explained in a previous video, textures in Modern Engine aren't just textures, they are materials. Materials that each have their own set of properties that need to be loaded. On top of that, all the metadata of the image also takes up space on your drive. This means that if I did exactly what Half-Life did and used a set of few dozen pictures for my characters instead of one big one, I'd end up having to load and store much more data. So I opted for a more standard way of making textures of having one big image. There are few ways of making textures. Hand painting, like that Sheik texture I showed you earlier, is one with a long-standing tradition in stylized games. But one that's far more popular is using real-life images to texture your object. Fun fact, Half-Life actually uses some bug pictures for some of these aliens. Of course, there are no real-life pictures of aliens, so more abstract objects are either hand-painted from scratch or painted over a real-life photo. This is actually a technique I'm using for this particular texture. I want to make this enemy a particularly aggressive one, so how do I convey that to the player? By invoking imagery of something that's fast and aggressive in real life. In this case, a tiger. I used a picture of potato beetle as a reference for this alien's shell. The same striped texture is used for certain armor parts of the legs and arms. This texture is simply a picture of a potato beetle taken straight from above with its appendages cropped off. In a similar vein as invoking tiger imagery with stripes, I wanted to convey the idea of strength by giving the alien 4 chest muscles consisting of protective chitin plates. Segmented plates of centipedes would be perfect for creating the 4 muscle look on the alien's fleshy parts. Unfortunately, remember when I mentioned I have fear of insects? Yeah, guess what happened when I googled close-up images of bugs. Suffice to say, I could not obtain good reference images of the centipedes. I ended up drawing the body texture myself using few colors and highlights. While I don't think it looks particularly good, I think it's alright enough to convey the idea. I also had to hand paint the face. The first step was to unwrap the UVs. I already explained what the UVs are in one of my older videos, but they are basically a flattened version of the model. We use Blender's Export UV Layout feature to get this UV map into a PNG overlay, which we can then use in Photoshop as a stencil for the face. Now that the model is finished and textures are applied, it's time for rigging. Rigging is the process of attaching the model to its skeleton, allowing us to move it like a puppet or a doll. Now you see the footage of me moving the bones into position, because this is the only footage I remember to record. But this is only the first step to having a functional character rig. After we put the bones in their place, it's time to attach the model to them. Now mind you, this will not allow us to move the model, it will only attach them together to make them a single object. This way the skeleton knows this is its model, and the model knows that is its skeleton, but they don't know how to follow each other yet. And why am I mentioning that? Because Blender is a stubborn beast, and even doing something as easy as attaching one thing to the other is a mess. Firstly, you have to select the thing you want to attach to the skeleton, then you select the skeleton itself, then you have to parent it using the parent menu, but alas, it did not work for me. For some reason, my mesh would parent itself to the arms of the same mesh, and only the arms. The only thing that works to actually attach the mesh properly was to take each part of the mesh and manually attach each one by one to the skeleton. Only then the hierarchy would be set properly with the skeleton controlling the mesh. And only then we can start applying weights. Weights are what dictates which bone controls which part of the body. Blender has an automatic feature which will try to assign weights automatically to each bone, and while that function is alright for simple models, our guy has two massive disadvantages. One, he's low poly, which makes the weight distribution confused at times, and two, he has two layers of wing on his back, causing the auto weights to get confused and attach wings and back together. Let me paint you a picture. To paint weights on a bone, we firstly have to go into the object mode, select the model we want to edit, go into bone options and select the bone we want to paint weights for. The bone list is not sorted in any way at all, so have fun finding the fucking things. Now you select your bone, we go and change into weight painting mode, not to be confused with vertex painting mode which is just next to it, then we can actually start painting our weights. You change something and you want to see if it works? Change back to object mode, click on the armature, change into posing mode, select your bone and then, just then, see if your weights work. If they don't, change back into object mode and repeat the process. I love Blender, I love open source projects, I love when non-profits are challenging big corporation monopolies, but god damn if this jack of all trades thing Blender is going for doesn't make every step infuriating. Anyway, after some court-ordered anger management classes, we have a working rig for our bug guy. Although not perfect, particularly with small parts like fingers or feet, it's gonna be enough for what I need it for. Now we can import our model into Unreal. This isn't that eventful outside of a little quirk Unreal has, where it uses a different scale for skeletal meshes than regular meshes. So you actually have to set import scale to be 100 times bigger than usual. The more interesting parts here are the materials. The alien has 3 different materials, with 3 different color textures. There's a material for the body, shell, and all the transparent bits, all coming to a texture resolution of 128 pixels square times 3. The size of these textures is questionable, since I could probably fit it onto a single 128 pixel texture if I really tried to, but I'm not a model artist. I'm a programmer who does modeling as means to an end, so it's alright if the textures aren't as optimized as possible. You may also notice that I wasted a lot of space on many of these textures, and there's a reason for it. As I said, usually I'd use only 2 textures, one for body stuff and second one for transparent bits. But for the sake of my own convenience, I decided to split the body into flesh and shell parts, which gave me a lot of wiggle room to draw my textures. But couldn't I still utilize the space better? I mean, when you look at the face, you can see a lot of empty space I could have used to make the face texture bigger. The answer is, I could, if I was making a photorealistic game in the 90s. And I would, but I'm not making a photorealistic game in the 90s. I am making a game that looks like a photorealistic game in the 90s, and that includes the limits and imperfections. Look at the texture of the Tentaleech, for instance. It's also 128 square pixels and wastes a lot of space on the mouth parts. You want to know why? The mouth used to be much bigger, but it looked really off, since it was much higher resolution than the texture I used for the body. Even though it was perfectly reasonable to use the whole thing, it would look much too detailed to fit with the rest of the model and other textures. So I had to scale it down, despite what the best optimization practices would tell me. We're in kind of the same boat with this guy. If I utilize my space too well, I could end up with something that's much too crisp. You may also notice I utilized the same trick Ocarina of Time did, by only drawing half of the texture and then flipping it horizontally to fill out the alien's face. But you can also see I didn't do that for the alien's torso, even though the body's model uses a mirrored texture. Well, that's just a mistake on my part. I drew that part before I started working on the UVs and forgot that I'm using mirror modifier, which makes all my model parts get perfectly mirrored across the middle, including the textures, so I can't even utilize the full texture. That was just a simple mistake on my part. But as I said in my previous video, the texture is not enough. We need a material, and this one is rather simple. It lacks any normal maps or roughness maps or any maps really, as the whole thing utilizes the same uniform attributes across the whole material. The material for the shell is shiny, the material for the body is rough and matte, and the material for wings and teeth doesn't use properties, since this kind of transparency doesn't allow them for optimization reasons. And yes, you've heard me right, wings and teeth. The concept art gives the alien a row of small sharp teeth, but modeling so many teeth would damage my poly count, which I didn't like. So I opted in for having two flat planes on each side of the skull and jaw, with a 2D texture of teeth applied to it. And since the wings already used a transparency texture, I'm not losing many resources by adding a small row of teeth on the side. This way I can give the creature pretty good looking teeth, while only using 2 polygons per row and utilizing materials that are already being used anyway.
Although my game doesn't use ragdolls for the sake of death animations, I still need ragdoll collisions, since they are what handles the bullet collision, and that was another really counterintuitive process that I hated every second of. For starters, the auto-generated collisions won't do. While they're fine enough for simple humanoids, this guy stood no chance. The curved wings and oddly shaped head made this guy a mess after the engine tried to assign it bone collisions. I had to go in and do it manually, which would be fine if I knew how. The problem arose when I tried to find out how, and couldn't find jack shit. No matter what phrases I googled, I got the same 8 or so useless results that amounted to telling me to use auto-generated collisions, or didn't tell me anything at all. Fortunately, Ryan Laley had a video on exactly what I needed. Except to find it, I had to jump down a rabbit hole of shitty tutorials, and I just so happened to stumble onto it in the recommended list. Now my mesh had working bones, which worked perfectly with the collision system. Except that's not true, because I still had the issue of wings. They were curved quarter spheres, and no shape could actually give me accurate collisions. So I decided to create a collision from static mesh for the wings specifically. But soon I found out that it doesn't work either. I selected my mesh to get used as a collision, but it did not actually add any collision shapes to the bones. So I foolishly thought I saw a tutorial on this specific thing yesterday while looking for my other issue. I can just look up the same tutorials right now to solve my problem. And of course, Google stopped showing me them, instead filling the results with completely irrelevant shite. I finally found a way to do it by making some educated guesses based on a collision tutorial for static meshes. And there's one more problem: bone size. For some goddamned reason, the minimum size I could get the bones to be was 0.5 units, which was so big that even the head nor the whole torso couldn't fill it all. I had to go into the Shapes tab and manually enter the size of each bone collision. But in the end, it was absolutely not worth it since the collision started freaking the fuck out for no reason. If the model was spawned anywhere in the world at all, it would not only launch everything around it into the air, it would also despawn the player. Once again, I'm just talking about a single model that caused all that. In the end, I had to remove the custom collisions from the wings, as there were 0 tutorials I could find on how to implement them, and my own implementation caused whatever this is supposed to be.
One more thing you could notice is that the body isn't blue anymore. Concept art had the body be black, but drawing highlights and shadows on black is not that easy. So I used an old painting technique, where black parts are actually painted blue. You could see it especially in comic books. If you ever saw a character with blue hair in old comics, that's why. Fun fact, Spider-Man's outfit was also black, but the blue highlights made people think it was blue and it just stayed that way. I drew it in blue, but it was much more noticeable than I expected. It also crashed greatly with the yellow shell pattern, so I used simple color shifting to turn the body to brown, making it fit better with the warm colors of the shell. And yes, I said colors, because this guy has a bunch of them. I wanted the player to really feel like they're fighting wild animals with these guys. And animals in nature aren't always uniform. Some have brighter or darker pigmentation, some have different patterns, some have different colors altogether, and so does this guy. The shell can spawn in either yellow or orange, and the body can be either black or brown. But maybe there's more colors, who knows? Sometimes animals mutate and are born with colors like no other. And there we have it. So much work, this whole video which will probably end up being super long. So much issues and grievances to have one enemy, with no behavior, AI or animations, or anything really that would make it more than a lifeless statue. Tune in next time when we actually make this guy into an actual enemy. That is, after I finish editing this hunk of a video.